How many times have you woken up today already feeling like you've lost the race? You hit that snooze button thinking it's rest, but you're actually burying your potential under the sheets, whispering to your soul that your dreams aren't worth the effort of standing up. That heavy silence at 9 a.m. isn't just a late start. It's the sound of a life being lived in rewind. You aren't just tired, you're spirit bankrupt and you don't even know it yet. You've tried to change, bought the planners, and made the vows, but they never stick. It's not because you're lazy, but because you've been fighting the day instead of mastering it. You feel trapped, like an invisible man in your own story, carrying a ton of cold lead that no amount of coffee can lighten. But what if the reason you can't get out of bed isn't the alarm clock, but the heavy invisible stones you're carrying that don't even belong to you? There is a secret weapon guarded by the 5 a.m. hour, a filter that separates the distracted from the legendary. By unlocking the dawn's discipline, you can gain 2 extra months of life every year. However, there is a hidden psychological barrier, a specific weight, that prevents 99% of people from ever crossing that threshold. And if you don't identify it in the next few minutes, no routine in the world will save you. Today, you'll follow Thomas, a lonely soul who transformed his scarcity into abundance. This is the exact blueprint to the protocol that will end your poverty of time forever. But first, we must examine the morning rot and the mocking silence of 9:14 a.m., and why your heart is racing with an anxiety you can't explain. Thomas's eyes snapped open to the harsh, unforgiving glare of a sun that had long since claimed the sky. The digital clock didn't blink. It just stared back with a mocking, neon 9:14 a.m. He lay there, pinned to the mattress by a weight that wasn't physical, but felt like a ton of cold lead. It was the silent scream of another morning wasted, another promise to himself broken before he'd even moved. You see, when Thomas hit that snooze button, he wasn't just grabbing 5 more minutes of sleep. He was essentially whispering to his own soul that his biggest dreams weren't worth getting out of bed for. This is what I call the morning rot, a constant hum of self-betrayal that starts at the molecular level and eats away at a man's confidence faster than any external failure ever could. He scrambled out of bed, heart racing with that jagged anxiety of someone who's already lost the race. There's no coffee strong enough to drown out the shame of knowing the world is already 2 hours ahead. But here is the chilling truth. Thomas wasn't just tired from lack of sleep. He was exhausted because he was carrying the expectations, the guilt, and the stones of a life that wasn't even his, a burden so heavy that his spirit was literally giving up. And unless he learned the letting go protocol, he would remain a ghost in his own hallways forever. But what exactly was that ton of lead pinning him down? It wasn't just laziness. In a moment, you'll discover the invisible filter that the world's most successful people use to block out this rot, and how it can literally give you a second chance at life before the clock hits 6 a.m. Thomas stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker out as the first gray smudge of light appeared. A thought struck him, cold and sharp. The future isn't some distant land you visit. It's a ritual you perform right here, in the quiet, before the rest of the world starts making demands. The dawn isn't just a time of day. It's the ultimate gatekeeper for those who actually want to win. Think of the 5 a.m. hour as a filter, a high mesh screen that keeps the noise out and the focus in. Most folks are still dreaming about success while the real players are already up, building it brick by brick. It's the only time when the digital vultures, the emails, the notifications, and the demands of others haven't started circling your head yet. In that sacred silence, the voice of your own destiny finally gets a chance to be heard over the static. But here is what Thomas was starting to realize. You cannot hear the voice of your destiny if your ears are filled with the echoes of everyone else's expectations. Mastering the dawn isn't just about waking up. It's about learning to drop the heavy stones of social pressure that you've been conditioned to carry since birth. If you try to enter the 5 a.m. hour while still holding on to the weight of others' opinions, you will collapse under the pressure before the sun even rises. Winning the first hour is like finding a secret cheat code to rig the day in your favor. But there's a reason Thomas still felt like an invisible man, despite this new logic. Very soon you'll see the heartbreaking reality of what happens to a soul that is time poor, and why being a nice guy was actually Thomas's biggest trap. Thomas was the kind of guy who could walk through his own office without triggering a single hello. He was just a cog in a machine that didn't even bother to oil him, trading his precious life force for pennies. And honestly, the math just wasn't adding up. His apartment was a graveyard of maybe later, where the very air felt stale, as if the room itself had given up on him. He wasn't just broke in the pocket, he was spirit bankrupt, which is a much harder hole to climb out of. Being time poor is a special kind of hell where you're always rushing but never actually getting anywhere. Thomas felt like he was living his life in the nosebleed seats, watching the real players down on the field. But what he didn't realize was that he was invisible because he was draped in the heavy shadows of other people's problems. He was so busy trying to be the reliable one for everyone else's demands that he had no energy left to define his own existence. He was trapped in a loop of mediocrity, stuck in a waiting room for a life that hadn't even called his name. He was an invisible man not by choice, but by the sheer weight of the stones he had picked up along the way. Guilt from the past, the expectations of a boss who didn't care, and the crushing need for approval. This is the silent killer. When you carry what isn't yours, you disappear behind the burden. But the universe has a way of shattering your invisibility in the most painful way possible. In a moment, you'll see the exact second Thomas's world collapsed, not because of a big tragedy, but because of a single empty chair at a dinner table, and a secret debt that would change everything. The Sunday roast smelled like home, but for Thomas, the air at the dinner table felt suffocatingly thin. As his sister shared stories of her latest promotion, her eyes glowing with the spark of a life well lived, Thomas found the texture of his mashed potatoes suddenly fascinating. He had no wins to share, no progress to report. Only the hollow echo of another week survived, but not conquered. Then he caught his father's gaze. It wasn't anger. It was something far worse. Quiet disappointment. It's a specific sting that hits your gut when you realize you've become the before photo in a world of afters. You are physically present, but everyone can see the fire has gone out behind your eyes. This is the true cost of carrying stones that aren't yours. You become so weighed down by the need to please or the fear of failing others that you lose the strength to build a life you can be proud of. The knockout blow came later. A crumpled medical bill in his pocket he'd been avoiding for 3 weeks. Those numbers weren't just debt. They were evidence of his total lack of personal margin. He realized that being a nice guy was no longer enough if he lacked the discipline to provide for himself. He was drowning because he never learned the letting go principles needed to clear his path. He was holding on to everyone else's expectations while his own house was on fire. The pain of staying stagnant finally became more unbearable than the terror of the work. He left with a bitter taste of shame and a desperate hunger for change. But as he walked into the cold night, he saw a light, a guardian of the dawn who knew a secret about the heavy burden Thomas was carrying. A secret that would explain why some people soar while others sink under invisible weights. Thomas was dragging a leaking trash bag to the curb, still shuffling in his frayed pajamas. The 6:00 a.m. air felt like a sharp slap in the face, a reminder that the world was already moving while he was just waking up. That's when he saw him. Mr. Holloway. The old man moved with the calculated precision of an architect, radiating a calm inner warmth that seemed to push back the morning fog. While Thomas stood there, shivering and exhausted, Holloway possessed a vitality you can't buy at a pharmacy. He looked at Thomas's tired eyes with a knowing, secret smile. The sun doesn't just give us light, son. It gives us a massive, unfair advantage if we know how to catch it, Holloway said in a voice like gravel and honey. Most people spend their lives reacting, dodging whatever the universe throws at them. I happen to the day. What Holloway was really saying was that he had mastered the art of selective focus. He wasn't just happening to the day. He was refusing to let the day's trivialities and other people's emotional demands weigh him down. He had long ago dropped the stones that Thomas was still white-knuckling. This wasn't just about discipline. It was about emotional liberation, the kind you find when you stop being a slave to what isn't yours. Holloway pointed toward a park bench. Meet me here at 5 a.m. tomorrow, or you can go right back to living in those shadows. It was more than an invitation. It was a contract for a new life. But there was a catch. Holloway knew that if Thomas showed up with the same cluttered mind and heavy heart, the 5 a.m. hour would break him. In the next moment, Holloway is going to reveal the math of the 13th month. But there's a hidden variable in that equation, a psychological trick to lighten your load that most people miss entirely. The park bench was freezing, and Thomas felt every bit of the biting cold through his thin hoodie. Holloway didn't offer a greeting. He just pulled out a leather notebook. You think success is about talent or luck, but it's actually a matter of simple, brutal arithmetic, he whispered. He began sketching numbers. If you start at 5 instead of 8, you secure 3 hours of pure focus. Multiply that by 365 days, and you get 1,095 hours of uninterrupted labor toward your dream while the rest of the world snoozes. It's like finding a hidden treasure chest filled with time that everyone else is simply throwing into the trash. When you divide those hours by a standard waking day, the truth is staggering. You aren't just gaining time, you're gaining 68 extra days of life every single year. While your rivals live 12 months, you are living 14. But Thomas, here is the flaw in the math that most people overlook. If you gain 68 days but spend them carrying the emotional baggage and the stones of other people's expectations, you haven't gained a life. You've only extended your sentence. You can weaponize your schedule to become a literal ghost in the machine, but if your internal software is still running everyone else's programs, these extra months will only lead to a faster burnout. There is a specific protocol to ensure these 68 days are spent building your empire, not carrying their bricks. And it starts with a 3-part alchemy that Holloway was about to reveal, a system that requires a clean slate you don't yet have. This isn't just about losing sleep, Thomas. It's about a 3-part alchemy, Holloway said. The first hour, from 5 to 6, belongs to the inner alchemist. This is your time for internal defragmentation. You sit in the silence, journaling your fears and meditating until your mind feels like a calm, mirror-flat lake. But let's be honest, your mind can't become a calm lake if it's filled with the jagged rocks of other people's expectations and the heavy stones of past guilt. This first hour is where you must learn to drop what isn't yours, or the rest of the day will remain a heavy climb. From 6 to 7, you become the architect, building the bridge out of your poverty through deep skill acquisition. While others dream of a bigger paycheck, you are literally installing the software required to earn one. Finally, at 7, you become the warrior, priming your biology through high-intensity movement and sweat. But there are 3 iron rules. Your phone stays dead until 8, you kill your old self with a freezing shower, and your alarm becomes a non-negotiable contract. Thomas felt a spark of hope, but also a chilling terror. He realized that killing the old self meant more than just a cold shower. It meant finally cutting the cords to the emotional burdens he'd been carrying for years. He had the roadmap, but he was about to face a demon that logic alone couldn't defeat. A demon that whispers in the dark when your body is at its weakest point. The first week felt like a slow-motion car crash for Thomas's tired, protesting body. His muscles didn't just ache. They screamed in a language of knots and deep resentment. The demon of the blanket was a silver-tongued liar, whispering that sleep was his only friend. By the 4th day, the alarm clock sounded like a gunshot in the heavy silence. It's tough to choose a dream when your bed feels like a warm, soft cloud of safety. He almost gave in, almost let the shadows win, but he remembered the cold math of those 68 extra days. He pushed through the fog, stepped onto his balcony, and watched the sky turn a bruised purple. For the first time, Thomas didn't feel like a lonely soul. He felt chosen, a member of a silent elite. But he realized something profound. The struggle wasn't just physical. The reason the blanket felt so heavy was that he was still mentally dragging the stones of yesterday into his dawn. He was trying to build a new destiny while still wearing the heavy chains of other people's guilt. He was colonizing the morning, claiming territory for his future. Yet a question remained. How long can a man stay awake if his spirit is still exhausted from carrying what doesn't belong to him? Thomas was about to discover the harvest of results, but he would soon learn that the biggest paycheck wasn't in his bank account. It was hidden in a release he hadn't yet made. Thomas spent 6 months grinding in the quiet hours while his neighbors were lost in REM sleep. Those 68 extra days weren't just a theory anymore. They were visible in the lines of his complex data architecture code, a skill his peers hadn't even heard of yet. He wasn't the ghost anymore. He was the man with the answers when the big systems finally crashed. When the promotion came, it didn't feel like a lucky break. It felt like a late payment. His bank account finally started to hum with the vibrant energy of a man who actually owns his time. But the doubled income and the fancy title were actually just side effects. The real wealth was the spiritual discipline that had replaced his old, jagged anxiety with a mountain's peace. Thomas moved out of the shadows of his cramped apartment and into a space filled with actual sunlight. However, as he tasted the sweet fruit of his labor, a new danger emerged. With success comes a new set of stones. The pressure to maintain the image, the demands of new people wanting a piece of his time, and the weight of high-level responsibilities. Thomas realized that if he didn't master the art of selective letting go, his new wealth would become his new prison. He had built the castle, but now he needed to learn how to keep the wrong people from filling it with their baggage. What was this final duty Thomas had to fulfill to ensure his fire would never go out? It's a secret pact that separates the temporary winners from the true masters of the dawn. And in a moment, I will show you how this same pact is the key to you finally dropping the stones that have been holding you back for years. Thomas stood on that same park bench, but he wasn't shivering in a hoodie anymore. He looked at the dawn, realizing it was a gift that most folks simply return unopened every day. It's a tragedy, leaving all that potential on the table just for a bit more unconsciousness. But you don't have to be most people if you're willing to make a small sacred pact. We're building a tribe called the First Hour Masters. It's for those who are tired of living their lives in a permanent state of rewind. This is a covenant, a promise that you're finally worth the extra effort. Your first hour belongs solely to your future self. However, let me be clear. Waking up early is only half the battle. If you check in for duty but your mind is still cluttered with the stones of yesterday's guilt and other people's demands, you are just waking up early to suffer. To truly claim your 68 extra days, you must sign a second, deeper covenant. One where you vow to stop carrying what was never yours to begin with. Without this emotional release, the 5 a.m. silence will only amplify your internal noise. In a few seconds, I'm going to reveal the exact tool Thomas used to drop those stones forever. But first, you need to draw your line in the sand. If you're ready to stop being a spectator, type Day 1 in the comments below. Whether you're starting a new course or writing your first page, this is your signal to the universe. Thomas knew his journey was just beginning, but he finally had the map and the compass. But there is one final piece of the puzzle, the actual manual that bridges the gap between waking up and waking up free. Thomas isn't some superhero with iron lungs. He's just a man who stopped negotiating with his own comfort. You're standing at the same crossroads right now, holding the keys to a kingdom you've been ignoring for years. The dawn is waiting for you, but it won't kick down your door or drag you out of that warm, soft grave. Will you remain a spectator in the nosebleed seats, or will you finally step onto the field and play the game? I'm challenging you to a 90-day covenant with the sunrise to rewrite your entire biology. Commit to the 60-60-60 protocol and watch as those 68 extra days of life begin to materialize. It'll be a war against your old self, but on the other side is a person who doesn't know how to lose. But here is the truth that Thomas had to face, and that you must face too. Many of the stories you hear here aren't just stories. They reflect the invisible weight you may be carrying every day. If you're tired of holding pain, responsibility, and guilt that were never yours, you will never have the strength to sustain the dawn. That is why I created the ebook called The Weight of Stones That Are Not Yours. It is the essential companion to this journey, the manual for those who want to let go, set boundaries, and finally live with the lightness required to conquer the 5 a.m. hour. When you secure your copy today, I'm also including 2 vital bonuses. Bonus 1, learning to let go, how to release the stones of the past that keep you pinned to the mattress. Bonus 2, when saying no is an act of self-love, the shield you need to stop people from filling your 68 extra days with their baggage. Don't just watch this story. Become the narrative that people whisper about when they discuss the secret of success. Your destiny is waiting in the silence of 5 a.m. Don't keep it waiting a second longer. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment.